Dad and doctors are speechless after mom gives birth to a white blonde-haired baby. Sometimes things happen in the world that are simply unexplainable. You can come out and give logical reasoning, but it doesn't change how amazing it is. This was certainly the case when a black Nigerian couple somehow gave birth to a white baby. This was certainly unusual and left people with a lot of questions. How did it happen? Why did it happen? How can it be explained? Every day, more and more babies are being welcomed into this world and change the lives of those around them forever. In fact, there are some babies that make it into the record books and hit the headlines across the world. That's exactly what happened when one baby was born in London. Nmachi was not heavier than any other baby in existence, and she was definitely not born with 13 teeth. Instead, it was her appearance that threw a spanner in the works and had her parents and doctors questioning her very existence. However, to truly understand this story, we need to know a little more about the family in question. Meet Angela and Ben Ihegboro. At 35 years old, Angela was over the moon to discover that she was pregnant again. She and her husband had already welcomed 2 other children into the world, and they couldn't wait to expand their family even further. After all, they were building a new life for themselves in London after moving from Nigeria 5 years previously, and this was the icing on the cake. Although the Ihegboro family now live in London with their 3 children, they were both born and raised in Nigeria. They were born to Nigerian parents and seemed to have native Nigerian blood running through their veins. Because of this, they were both dark-skinned and dark-haired with brown eyes. In fact, there's nothing out of the ordinary about this couple, which is why doctors were so bemused by the fact that their 3rd child is so extraordinary and looks so completely different to her parents. It was in 2010 that Ben and Angela Ihegboro welcomed their 3rd child into the world. The pregnancy was standard and the delivery even more so, so what was so intriguing about this particular birth? Well, as soon as Nmachi made her way into the world, her parents and the doctors around her noticed a stark difference between her and her parents. It was hard to miss such a bold contrast, and they just couldn't take her eyes off her thanks to her beauty and these differences. So, what was it about Nmachi that looked so different to her parents? Instead of inheriting their dark skin and their native Nigerian looks, Nmachi was white. Her skin was not dark in the slightest, and she did not look like she was the daughter of 2 black parents. As if that wasn't bizarre enough, her differences didn't stop there. As well as having white skin, Nmachi also had blonde hair with bright blue eyes. Was this even their child? Had the doctors played a prank on them and swapped Nmachi with another baby? When Ben and Angela took their first look at their new daughter, they were lost for words. Nmachi looked nothing like they expected, and nothing like their 2 other children. They had no idea how they could give birth to a white baby in the first place, let alone one with blonde hair and blue eyes. As Ben continued to stare at his new addition to the family, he eventually found a few words to exhale. All he could muster was a sharp, "What the flip?" as he stared at his daughter. However, Ben wasn't the only one who was shocked at the sight of Nmachi. The doctors were also scratching their heads and wondering how Nmachi could be so different if Ben and Angela were her biological parents. Because of this, they couldn't help but ask an awkward question. Was Angela sure that Ben was the father? Angela refuted the outrageous claims, and Ben believed every word that came out of her mouth. Nmachi was definitely his. Unfortunately, the doctors still weren't convinced, because that meant that their questions were still unanswered. Angela and Ben continued to push the fact that Nmachi was their biological daughter, so the doctors were forced to explore other avenues. They needed to find out why she looked so different to her parents and how 2 black parents had given birth to a white baby. Their first port of call was to explore the idea of albinism, a genetic condition that means the person is devoid of melanin, which colors your hair, skin, and your eyes. With her white skin and blonde hair, they thought it could have definitely been an option. Around 1 in 70 people across the world exhibit traits of albinism throughout their life, but research has suggests that albinism is most prominent in Africa. Most notably, in Nigeria. Thanks to their black counterparts, albinos in these African countries stand out from the crowd and often suffer from social injustice. Although Ben and Angela had never considered the idea that their daughter could have albinism, did it answer their questions? Was their daughter's appearance the result of a trait that is fairly common in their native country? In the doctor's professional opinion, Nmachi was a classic case of albinism with 2 black parents. It would explain all of her physical differences, especially as Ben and Angela had ruled out infidelity and the prospect of another father. To be sure of their hypothesis, the doctors decided to run some tests. However, they soon discovered that Nmachi did not have albinism in the professional sense of the word, but there was no telling whether she could still have a mutated version of the genetic condition. Everyone around Nmachi was not convinced that she had a typical form of albinism, and the doctors wanted to crack their case. They searched for solid proof as to why Nmachi was born with white skin, blonde hair, and blue eyes, and they believed that the answer could lie in Ben and Angela's ancestry. After all, genetics don't always follow all of the rules of life, and can sometimes play tricks on those involved. Most importantly, genes can skip generations and not be physically present in the biological parents. As the doctors tried to get their head around the anomaly in the room, they decided to play with the idea of long-dormant genes. Although genes are passed down from person to person as each generation goes by, it doesn't mean that these genes will be actively present in the child. Certain characteristics and traits can be passed down for numerous generations before they are visible in the child, and doctors believe that Nmachi carried dormant white genes that had skipped her parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents. In fact, the doctors later went on to explain that both Ben and Angela could have carried the white genes in their genetic makeup. Although they were categorical black thanks to their Nigerian heritage and ancestry, they both could have had white relatives down the line. If both of the parents carried this dormant gene, their children would be more likely to exhibit the physical effects of this. Could this finally answer their questions? It wouldn't be the first time this has happened over the course of history. Just 1 year after Nmachi made her way into the world, another black couple were stunned to discover that they had given birth to a white baby. Francis and Arlette Trubong were shocked and overwhelmed when they discovered that their baby had not inherited their dark features like their other son, but had white skin and blonde hair. Like Nmachi, albinism was ruled out as a factor for his physical appearance, and so was infidelity. They had both been completely faithful to each other throughout their relationship. Like Ben and Angela, Francis and Arlette tried to understand why their son looked so different to them and began to search through their family history to understand more. They ultimately discovered that generations previously, one of Arlette's relatives had also given birth to a white child. This was Arlette's great-great-great-grandmother, and the gene could have been passed down. Yet, they weren't overly convinced, nor do they care. Their son is their son, and that's that. To them, it doesn't matter what the color of his skin is. Although Ben and Angela were of the same opinion, they wanted to get to the bottom of their conundrum. They loved Nmachi with all of their heart, but they couldn't help but wonder where her physical appearance had come from. So, they began to trace their own family history. They kept their eyes peeled for anyone who had any relations with a white person, or anyone who gave birth to a white baby, but they couldn't happen. The plot was thickening, and they were getting further and further from the truth. When the doctors heard this news, they were even more confused. They weren't getting any closer to understanding why Nmachi looked so different to them, and they were not getting the answers they wanted.